So why do we like to hear his presentation?
Yeah, we're going to have a presentation tonight on the results of the community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We did one previously for just the town output, and then we had them work on the community-wide. So with that,
thank you, Rick. Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm Nick Martin with the Sierra Business Council, and we're here tonight to present to you the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for community-wide. As Rick said, this is a follow-on to the study that we did about a year ago. I first wanted to give recognition to the council and the town staff for current work that has already been done towards energy efficiency and sustainability here in the town of Loomis. And there are clear economic benefits of the work, one of those being avoided future planning costs having to do with CEQA and the new greenhouse gas emissions, the cumulative greenhouse gas emissions consideration, direct energy savings through programs such as administered by the gas and electric company, that energy watch program, direct install, and then also leveraging funding that's already been paid by the citizens of this town in as far as the public discharge on PG&E ratepayer dollars. So that's dollars that are going to the CPUC and divvied out to the various investor-owned utilities and spent on energy efficiency. In this program, and the Sierra Energy Watch program and others, are bringing those dollars back to Loomis to be spent here. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on who the Sierra Business Council is, the background of greenhouse gas emissions inventories, and then get into the actual results of the inventory. The Sierra Business Council is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're based out of Truckview. We do work in the entire Sierra Nevada, geographic Sierra Nevada region. The Green Communities Program is administered by Pacific Gas and Electric Company. It is a three-phased approach. Like I said, this is dollars, ratepayer dollars that are coming back and being spent here. So the first phase was completed last year. It was the municipal operations inventory that dealt with the owned and operated facilities of the town of Loomis, and this is the second phase of that, the community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and that covers the geopolitical boundary of the town of Loomis, all sources of greenhouse gas emissions within the jurisdiction. And then phase 3 is developing a climate action plan. And I want to point out here, for a point of clarity, since it has become an issue of contention, the partnership on this program. It's a program administered by PG&E, and it is conducted by the Sierra Business Council, and the Sierra Business Council has subcontracted with ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. And now the acronym ICLEI stands for International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. However, they now go by just ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. And ICLEI was a co-developer of the software, the calculation software that was used in this inventory, to take the data that was collected, to input it into the calculator to get the actual CO2 equivalent data, as you'll see in the following slides. And that software was developed by ICLEI as well as the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the National Association of Clean Air Agencies. These are the communities that we're currently working with in this program that have developed phase 1 and now phase 2 inventories. The counties are highlighted there in bold, and then the little yellow electricity symbols there are the cities within those counties that have participated. So these are the drivers of why we're here talking about greenhouse gas emissions and why we're conducting greenhouse gas emissions inventory in California. There has been state legislature passed that are recommending work done in this arena. Assembly Bill 32 and CEQA are probably the main drivers here, in SB 375 is at the larger level for metropolitan So the actual inventory itself is a measurement of the greenhouse gases that are emitted from various sources within the jurisdiction. These come from the lights and heating for building, for the built environment and building energy use. There's methane emissions that come from solid waste as it's taken to a landfill. Transportation emissions having to do with the fuel production in our engines. Once an inventory is developed, the jurisdiction can begin to plan for future reductions to those emissions to be in line with the state legislation that has come down the line. This is also identifying the cost savings opportunities from that. As we all know, kilowatt hour being used is money being spent towards the production of that, the generation of that electricity. These are the 3 greenhouse gases that are included in this inventory. They all have different global warming potentials. These are equated back to what we call this carbon dioxide equivalent. So each one is given a value, a global warming potential value, and multiplied. A ton of that greenhouse gas emitted is multiplied by that multiplier to get the carbon dioxide equivalent so that they can all be measured on an equal playing field. These are some of the data sources that were used to collect data in those emission sectors on the left. And then that into the results for the town of Loomis. This is remember, a 2005 baseline. So this data is 2005 data. The total emissions for the jurisdiction community-wide is 56,041 metric tons. Those different pie chunks show where those emissions come from, what different sectors those come from, transportation being the largest sector. The emissions from transportation, 69% of those come from local roads, and only 30% come from state highways, and that has to do with most other jurisdictions. The state highways is a large, rural jurisdictions that we do, state highways is the largest percentage. However, there's a small section of state highway running through it that is contributed to that total. The residential sector is almost equally split between natural gas and electricity, with some coming from propane, and then small amounts from wood burning and fuel oil and kerosene. This is 20% of the overall community emission for the residential sector. Commercial and industrial sectors is 15% of the total community emissions, 80% of that coming from electricity. Solid waste and wastewater sectors accounts for 3% of the community's total emissions. 86% is from waste deposited. So this is what's categorized and accounted for as a scope 3 emission. So this is all of the solid waste that is not necessarily landfilled in the jurisdiction, but it is generated within the jurisdiction and taken somewhere to landfill. So those emissions can be attributed to the town of Loomis as a source. So next steps to do that this data can be used for, as I said, the third phase of this program is climate action planning, if the jurisdiction so chooses down that path. And this is to develop, for the town of Loomis and its citizens and staff, to develop strategies to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions kind of on your own terms, without letting state mandates later in the future come down and identify what areas and what mitigation measures the town needs to take. A climate action plan developed now by the town of Loomis could avoid those future planning costs and make it more of a unique approach for the jurisdiction. This is a diagram of the process of climate action planning. The first step is the inventory of the emissions, which is done. And then step 2 is identifying what targets the jurisdiction feels necessary to be able to meet the state mandates. But then following on is the development of a plan, implementing the policies that are and strategies that are developed through the plan. And then the last steps are along the lines of monitoring. If this is the climate action planning process is an adaptive management strategy. It's constantly monitored to make sure that the measures and the strategies that have been agreed upon in the plan are actually being effective and working. So the monitoring and progress tracking is very important in that process. And this is basically saying the similar steps to the previous slide. This is shows a little bit the relationship between the outcomes of the plan to the actual development. Engaging the EIR process in a CEQA now, the greenhouse gas emissions, the cumulative greenhouse gas emissions are a requirement of the CEQA process, so all future project planning needs to go through that process, and the development of CAP, that could be greatly streamlined. At CoolCalifornia.org, this is just a funding wizard for a tool for local governments to be able to find areas and to be able to bring funding to pay for some of this work, since there is not, in the state of our economy now, there's not a plethora of general funding that is available to go towards this sort of planning. And I'd like to open it up to the council for questions at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Morales, any questions?
Not at this time.
Mr. Lewis, any questions?
Yes, you mentioned public process for a climate action plan will be done. What type of public process? Is that something that you organize in Loomis? How do you go about doing that?
This is a joint effort with the Loomis, the town of Loomis staff, planning staff, to identify key stakeholders in the community that would be important to have at the table to discuss these strategies and policies moving forward revolving around greenhouse gas emissions. So it's very much a town of Loomis activity and engaging the public that the town of Loomis knows that.
Okay, great. Is that climate action plan next step funded under the funding that was done for this work?
So currently there's funding from PG&E for the energy efficiency chapter of the climate action plan. PG&E is unable to allocate dollars to go towards, within a climate action plan there's multiple chapters, one of those dealing specifically with energy usage, and PG&E will fund that plan, but they are hesitant to be able to fund any other of the sections, as there are no measurable kilowatt hour or therm savings that are gained from that. So yes, there is partial funding, and that's one of your business council's goals and tasks is to search for other funding to be able to bring to local governments to plan for the rest of the climate action plan. So it isn't a half-hearted effort when it does happen.
Okay. On the other cities and counties that you've been looking at, are you seeing similar results in terms of percentage for electricity and residential, or are we unique in those breakouts percentage-wise?
They are relatively similar. However, I think most of what we see is a pretty even split between electricity and natural gas. It is really dependent on the jurisdiction and how rural the jurisdiction is, as far as the access to those electrical resources.
I was asking more the electricity, and electricity is 80%, residential is 20%, 60% residential is 20% on that pie chart.
Right.
So are you seeing residential being that significant thing and electrical being that significant in other communities? Or
the percentages are usually a little bit less for residential in most other jurisdictions, and that being because the transportation sector is more heavily, has a heavier percentage than it does here in the town of Loomis.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. And for residential and commercial, is that mostly from buildings and heating, ventilation, air conditioning, or is there something else involved there?
That's from the facilities within those sectors.
Okay. And
that's the data that comes from PG&E and other utility providers in the region.
Okay, and are you aware of the Green Room and Task Force that we had in 2010, and the Council adopted sustainability goals in 2010 and 2011 that were adopted as input to a climate action plan?
I am aware of those. I have not considered the impact that those would have in a climate action plan, but I'm sure that they would since they are already developed.
Okay. And does it matter whether, in terms of the types of recommendations that might come out of a climate action plan, does it matter whether, in terms of those particular policies and strategies to help people save money, does it matter whether it's being done for climate change, sustainability, or efficiency? Are the policies and strategies likely to be similar?
I guess what you're asking is dependent on the reasoning for the actions. The outcomes would be the same, which would be the energy reduction and cost savings. And yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, so it doesn't matter whether this is being done for climate change or sustainability. What the climate action plan will do is identify specific ways that the residents, the businesses, and the town can save money by implementing energy and other resource management policies and strategies that would come out of this analysis. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, you mentioned that the three areas where we would benefit most are in compliance with AB 32, CEQA, and SB 375. And I was wondering if you could, start with AB 32, maybe give us a little bit of explanation for those less familiar with that, what those benefits are. And is there cap and trade money that comes out of SB 32 to finish off with the action plan, do you think?
The cap and trade money, there is potential for that that's being discussed current. It's uncertain where the cap and trade money that would be a result of the implementation of Assembly Bill 32 would go towards. Those were the three drivers that I had mentioned for this work in California. The actual economic benefits that I listened was the avoided future planning costs having to do with mainly with CEQA, direct energy savings through energy efficiency direct install programs, and then the leveraging of funds that have already been paid by the ratepayers into this public goods charge and the money being filtered back into the community.
Okay, so but what I was looking for is maybe like with CEQA, right now when a project comes in, there's CEQA requirements that they have to comply with, that by doing a climate action plan, we would be able to alleviate their burden, if you will.
Right. The idea is that in any development project currently that goes through a CEQA analysis, in that process, it is now mandated that it take into account the cumulative greenhouse gas emissions resulting from that project. And so identifying through a climate action plan or other general plan elements that deal with greenhouse gas emissions, the idea is that if a plan is developed, or a project is developed through those planning channels that are already set in place, whether it be the general plan elements or a climate action plan or energy action plan, whatever you want to call it, that yes, the actual cumulative GHG emissions for that project would inherently already be being addressed through the original planning process.
And so a specific project might be the village project. In our case, down here behind Rayleigh's, it's also where we've allocated our high-density housing for zoning for the state affordable housing requirements. Now, when they come in to submit a plan, if we have this done, then they don't have to deal with greenhouse gas issues in their stuff. Would that be correct?
I'm not exactly familiar with that project. However, that is the idea, and that is something that I'm sure we'll know more about in the near future as these things start to be challenged in the courts, and that's kind of where the CEQA viability would be tested.
Okay, thanks, that's all.
And a couple of questions on how the study was done. You have this data about how much CO2 and other things are produced by the residents of Loomis. How did you go about deciding the residents of Loomis? You know, how often we drive our cars, the cylinders, tell me a little bit about the methodology that you utilized for this.
So the protocol that we followed is developed by the Air Resources Board, the California Climate Action Registry, and others, and that stipulates this is a protocol that's used by many other local government jurisdictions in the state, and what it does is it guides the data sources that are available, that have the data available.
What are some of the data sources you use?
And so, for example, the transportation sector, the Caltrans Highway Performance Monitoring System is an estimation-based approach to the vehicular miles traveled within a community. They do traffic studies and use that data to extrapolate over 365 days during the year to estimate what the traffic, the vehicular miles traveled is within that community.
Okay.
So it is estimation based.
So everything's basically that. How about on electricity? Are you using the smart meters to pull that info, or how do you get that info?
So that the electricity data and natural gas usage data, that is coming directly from Pacific Gas and Electric Company. That data is released due to the Privacy Act. It is highly aggregated. It is given to, the data is available insofar as the sectors that we have listed: residential, commercial, industrial. So it doesn't get down to the meter level of the actual meter for a resident in the city or in the town of Loomis is unknown. It's just aggregated into the total residential energy usage.
So how does our energy use today compared to what it was in 1990? Because that's the goal that apparently we're striving for. Are we there now?
Right, that's the goal that has been set. However, that is also the reason why we are taking 2005 data. As these pieces of legislation were developed, the data integrity from 1990 is not there. And so that is why the baseline has been set at 2005. And there's percentages that have been determined of how we can get back to the 1990 levels, or calculate back to the 1990
Okay,
levels.
so if you were in a very energy efficient community in 1990, you're really penalized because you're below the norm to start with, but you have to drop back down to whatever 1990 was, even if that was lower than the state average, right?
You may be, I mean, those goals are set at the state level, that it is the percentage of emissions for those years that are given in those.
And it's only the bad stuff that we produce within town. The freeway doesn't count, and the railroad track doesn't count. So,
Well, it does count, but it's accounted for separately.
and then there's one item here on page, let's see if it's in page 21, long-term goals. Then down in the second paragraph, it talks about that the town of Loomis works to reduce its emissions sooner rather than later. The sooner a stable level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is achieved, the less likely it is that some of the most dire climate change scenarios will be realized. Can Loomis really save the world?
That is a very good question.
Well, I mean, it's a statement here, and I really wonder why somebody wrote that. I'm not being funny or sarcastic or anything. I read it and wrote, and I'm just, I have a question that this implies that by doing this, we're going to have a major effect. We probably have an effect, but I'm not sure why this was written.
You're probably correct. I mean, I agree that this it is a very overarching statement, and that is. It isn't to discourage the work that's being done on the part of Loomis already towards these efficiency and energy usage reduction.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question. Is there any action that's needed tonight?
No, Madam Mayor, this is received.
Okay. I would like to open it up for public comment at this time. Before we do that, may I see a show of hands on how many people would like to speak on this? Okay. I would like to set the limit for 2 minutes, and I would also like to let everyone know that you can also send comments at any time and to be read to our town manager. We also accept input via writing as well. So if you're not able to make the meeting or have something you want read, that's always a possibility to make your comment in writing, should you feel you needed more time. And also, I would just ask that if somebody's made a comment, then rather than just making the same comment to just concur, but if you have a different comment, please feel free to come to the podium. And if you could state your name, state your address, and whether or not you live in the town limits. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Belden Leverage. I live in Sacramento, not in the town limits here. And I'd like to call your attention to the section titled Evidence of Human-Caused Climate Change on page 3 of the presentation that you folks in the council have. And that's one of the greenhouse gas emissions presentation. The footnote from the IPCC on page 3 notes a date of 2007. And this is prior to the information before the Climate Gate was exposed. In late 2009, hackers exposed the global warming con, later called Climate Gate, when they targeted the University of East Anglia's Climatic Research Unit, known as CRU, and published the files including personal messages on the internet. Among the most damaging is one which appears to suggest that CRU used a trick to massage years of temperature data to hide the decline. Climate change skeptics claim that some of the leaked messages discussed ways of manipulating data that fails to agree or comply with the establishment view that climate change is real and is being driven by man. Let me repeat that again. Climate change skeptics claim that some of the leaked messages discuss ways of manipulating data that fails to agree or comply with the establishment view that climate change is real and is being driven by man. So if we cannot depend on this information being viable and reliable, how can we depend on the information presented in this PowerPoint? Thank you.
Evelyn Mizak, I'm from Rockland, California. Also on page 3 of the presentation, the Goddard Institute is cited as evidence of rising temperatures and global warming, now called climate change. However, in March of this year, 2012, a group of 49 former NASA scientists and astronauts sent a letter to NASA Administrator Carl Bolden. We've distributed copies of that letter. You should have it in your... Oh, Trinit's taking care of it. The group includes 7 Apollo astronauts and 2 former directors of NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. They are dismayed over the failure of NASA, and specifically the Goddard Institute for Space Studies, to make an objective assessment of all available scientific data on climate change. They charge that NASA is relying too heavily on complex climate models that have proven scientifically inadequate in predicting the climate change of only 2 decades in advance. Many of the former NASA scientists have doubts about the significance of the CO2 climate change theory and have stated their concern over NASA's extreme advocacy for an unproven theory. They wrote, quote, "We believe the claims by NASA that man-made carbon dioxide is having a catastrophic impact on global climate change are not substantiated, especially when considering thousands of years of empirical data. with hundreds of well-known climate scientists and tens of thousands of other scientists publicly declaring their disbelief in the catastrophic forecasts, it's clear that this science is not settled. Again, if we can't depend on the information being reliable, how in the world can you depend on the information presented in this PowerPoint? Thank you. Timed.
My name is Carol Keelan, and Carol Keelan, and I live in Rockland. Carol Keelan, and I live in Rockland. This is California policy sections. Of greatest concern to cities in California is the unknown impact of AB 375 and implementing AB 32, California Global Warming Solutions Act. Business leaders and local government officials met in Sacramento this past June to discuss the California Manufacturers and Technology Association's long-anticipated AB 32 cost impact report and investment survey results. The report found the following effects. Cumulative costs, $135.8 billion. Annual AB 32 direct costs in 2020, $35.3 billion. Gross state product, GSP, reduction by $153.2 billion, a loss of 5.6%. California job losses, 262,000. Household energy prices increased by $2,500 per year per average family. State and local tax revenue reduced by $6.8 billion to $7.4 billion from state revenue. $640 million from local revenue. How does Loomis plan to save jobs, reduce household energy costs, and keep from losing revenue? Should people move out of Loomis? ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainable Climate Mitigation Program. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Steve Johansson, and I'm from Orangevale. Most of us in this room must be aware that much of the input in this report and methodology comes from ICLEI. For those of you who do not know what ICLEI stands for, it's the International Council of Local and Environmental Initiatives. Let me say that again, International Council of Local and Environmental Initiatives. Page 5 of the report shows that ICLEI's 5 milestones: inventory, targeting, developing a plan, implementing that plan, which in the end will claim total control of our land, your land, and our travel and our resources. This is not in the interest of the taxpayers and the residents of Loomis or the citizens of California. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Marmot, and I live in Roseville. ICLEI was spawned by the United Nations Agenda 21, whose key concerns are: number 1, abolishing private property and redistributing it according to socialist goals worldwide. And number 2, herding humans into small urban communities where, stripped of freedom and mobility, we will live and work according to government dictate. Agenda 21 is being implemented throughout the United States as the quiet work of ICLEI finds its way into state law, county code, and town council resolutions. If this is implemented, we would be allowing the United Nations to decide how we live our lives.
Ken Hokinson, 3440 Ashley Creek Drive, Loomis. There is an immediate conflict of interest for the people in the town of Loomis. ICLEI does not represent the interest of our people, but they do represent a radical global environmentalism backed by the United Nations. By the way, I do appreciate the report's footnote on page 5 noting the change of ICLEI's name.
The name may have changed, however, the agenda has not. ICLEI continues to hold a global agenda pushing for control at the local level. Thank you.
Diane Leverage from Sacramento. ICLEI is really an organization with extreme beliefs on global warming that promote the United Nations big government socioeconomic policies. The United Nations Millennium Papers cautioned activists not to mention the UN agenda because of potential American backlash and instructed them, so we call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, smart growth, or even sustainable development. Be cautious around the word sustainable. Tonight it's called Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory Presentation, but by any other name, frankly, it would smell as bad. Sustainability has less to do with the environment and everything to do with our economics. It is an attack on capitalism and an attack on America's middle class lifestyle, us. Local sustainability offices under the auspices of ICLEI are the tiny visible tip of the monstrous Agenda 21 Sustainable Development iceberg, the ultimate goal of which is to transform American society from the bottom up into a socialist ward of the United Nations global governance. Sustainability invokes government power to enforce activist views of environmentalism. They want to replace farmers, ranchers, and other landowners' concept of stewardship with government control. This is not democracy, but it is socialism. It merges environmentalism and socialism to expand government into every aspect of our lives, including the way we use our land, produce our food, build our housing, transportation, manufacturing, even health care. Our American heritage is based on the principle of private property rights. Agenda 21 and environmentalism are expanding government until it has the power to
come to the
control.
podium. That's been 2 minutes. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Could we get the next person, please? Thank you. Say your name and address, and if you are from if you're a resident, Loomis.
Steve Fioravanti, Roseville. The good news is that cities and counties like Carroll County, Maryland, and states like Tennessee and Alabama have passed laws and resolutions prohibiting any involvement or participation in the controversial scheme known as United Nations Agenda 21, implemented through their non-governmental organization of ICLEI. The numbers of defectors continue to grow. These local governments have exercised due diligence and are now pulling and defunding their partnership with ICLEI. They are purging their sustainable development plans recommended by ICLEI. We, the residents of Loomis, demand that the town of Loomis exercise due diligence on behalf of the citizens and taxpayers and reject this report in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brennan 28235, Grand Island, Lewis, California. The council has received copies of an article written by Trevor Landau from about the Agenda 21 resolution pushed by Nancy Pelosi on the floor of the House of Representatives. There is a URL in this article which refers to C-SPAN video. In this C-SPAN video, Ms. Pelosi describes on the House of Representatives of the floor as follows, and I quote Ms. Pelosi's words. A bill to express a sense of Congress that the United States should assume a strong leadership role in the implementation of the decision made at the Earth Summit by developing a national strategy to implement Agenda 21 and other Earth Summit agreements through domestic policy and foreign policy, by cooperating with all countries to identify the ultimate further agreement to protect the global environment by supporting and participating in the high-level United Nations Sustainability Development Commission. Those are Ms. Pelosi's words. It is important that the Council know that Article 1 of the Constitution, Section 10, prohibits states and their subdivisions from entering into alliances with foreign operatives. ICLEI is a foreign operative, hence Agenda 21 is a direct violation of the United States Constitution. Thank you.
Doris Manley, 6136 Lockwood Court, and that's Loomis. Town of Loomis 2005 community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory is outdated in relevance. Why? Recent scientific data. As of 2007, 400 prominent scientists worldwide have disputed man-made global warming claims. In 2008, that number grew to 650 scientists, and then in 2010, the number grew to 1,000, and it continues to grow. In January 2012, 16 scientists openly contested the so-called settled science of global warming in an open letter in the Wall Street Journal. They point out that there has been no discernible global warming in the past decade. This pesky fact has led global warming supporters to switch focus from the term warming to climate change and then to extreme weather events, allowing anything unusual that happens in our climate, such as wildfires and flooding, to be attributed to CO2. The 16 scientists state that there is no compelling scientific argument for drastic action to decarbonize the world's economy, and that aggressive greenhouse gas control policies are not justified economically. Such things like electric car paths, green retrofitting of homes and businesses, for instance. The 16 continue to offer advice to potential candidates for electoral office, saying every candidate should support rational measures to protect and improve our environment, but it makes no sense at all to back expensive programs that divert resources from real needs and are based on alarming but unsupportable claims of incontrovertible evidence. Alarmism. Why does the environmental establishment perpetuate alarmism with regard to climate change? Answer. Alarmism over climate change is of great benefit to many, providing government funding for academic research and research for government bureaucracies to grow. It offers excuse for governments to raise taxes, and on and on. In conclusion, based on the increasing studies that debunk the claims of climate change theories, I believe action should be taken on the part of the Loomis Town Council to scrap the 2005 community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory, as well as any attempt to move forward in creating a climate action plan. Going so-called green really means more government control.
We need to give everybody their time to work. Thank you. We appreciate that.
Debbie Shores, 9291 Tanglewood Way, Loomis, California, and I do live outside of the city limits, but I'm in the town every day.
Too bad.
Spent quite a little time going over this report. Quite a few eyes have been on it. And I want to share an expert's opinion. I was able to get this data to Dr. Paul Hauser, a hydrometeorologist. He single-handedly debunked ICLEI's data on the 4 dams in the North State that they were trying to dismantle. And interestingly enough, after he perused this document for a couple of days, wow, amazing. Loomis's greenhouse gases are way below the national norm for towns. So with that in mind, part of this document was that somewhere down the line, travel demand management was going to have to be put into place. Have any of you guys Googled what travel demand management is?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Travel demand management. Okay? This is a program specifically targeted to single occupancy vehicles. This is a program that has been instituted in Europe. It is a program that has been instituted in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, let me tell you how it works out. You have to pay someone to get in the car to drive with you if you're by yourself and you're going to certain parts of the town. So, if I'm single in Loomis, can I not drive on the streets? If I sick, do I have to ride the bicycle because I can't get someone to take me to the doctor? Are we going to put diamond lanes out here everywhere in Loomis? I mean, come on, guys, let's get real. Scrap this plan. Thank you.
Down in Newcastle, California, I don't live in Loomis. A letter to the editor. This week, the Loomis City Council is meeting to discuss whether or not to adopt a plan called Smart Growth, otherwise known as UN Agenda 21, which has recently been rejected by the Colfax City Council. Agenda 21 opens the floodgate to draconian rules and regulations that are stunning in their scope, all under the guise of protecting the environment. For example, going to the store for a gallon of milk alone in your car, maybe not in Loomis. Ride share everywhere, maybe coming to your town. Motorcycles, not so much. Lawnmowers, bad idea. New business, not worth the effort. A little over 40 years ago, the front cover of the Time magazine terrorized the American public With dire warnings of a return of the Ice Age, it could happen literally overnight, warned the experts. Children would freeze, crops fail, people starving. Now many of the same suspects told us we would freeze or telling us we're going to bake. I'm not a scientist, nor do I need to be one. Anyone with the intellect approaching that of a pencil eraser can read knows that Greenland was not named because it was covered with ice. 500 years ago, records showed that England had one of its best grape harvests. The Earth's temperature has cycled for many years and will continue for a long time. Are these prophets of doom blinded by towering ignorance, or is it something more sinister going on? I suspect the latter. The climate change hoax has nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with power and control. All governments, big or small, by their very nature, seek to increase their power. We Americans are slowly being stripped of our freedoms by one of the greatest scams ever perpetrated in history. Think not? Next year, try and buy an inexpensive light bulb that puts out some kind of light. Or maybe a gas can that really puts out gas. I urge the Loomis City Council to kick this Agenda 21 snake out the door, or it will bite us all. Further, I urge the Auburn City Council and the Placer County Board of Supervisors to take a close look at this snake before the snake crawls under their door.
Everybody their time.
Yeah, well, I took his time.
Public comment for a moment. We need to respect everybody's time, and in order to give everybody their time, we have limited it to 2 minutes. Other people have taken 2 minutes, and everybody deserves their time. Not to intrude upon that time, please. If that continues, we're going to have to stop. And I would encourage everybody, I see you all have a handout, we can take those from you, but unless we can stay within the 2 minutes. Thank you.
Claudia Taylor, Auburn. I also do not live in this city limits. I'm here to appeal to your consciences. There are many, many, many scientists out there, 31,000 and plus, that do not agree at all with this Agenda 21 sustainable development as pure science. It's fake science. I implore you, as supposedly the guardians of the taxpayers' money of this city, to really look at all of the facts. I mean facts. And there was a question posed tonight about whether these emissions, this report and the results of it, would cost the taxpayers any money. In fact, would it save money? When you have to implement something like this, there's lots of regulations, and regulations are not free. They cost money. You have to hire people to do the regulations. So there is, and there's also from the report, stakeholders. You are encouraged to get stakeholders. The stakeholders are, you're looking at them in this room. Those are the stakeholders. Not people that will just agree with your point of view, but they're the people who are paying the bill. So I appeal to your conscience to really look at all the facts and to listen carefully to what is being said by every single person here tonight, and not cutting them off if they have another sentence or two to say. Thank you.
I would like to just clarify, if the time limit speaks at 2 minutes, you do not have something, you're welcome to send that in writing. But to be fair to everybody, we have to give everybody their 2 minutes. If that's not enough time, please send your comments in. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gwen Myers. I live in the city of Roseville. I recently, on the more practical aspects, I recently went to a utility meeting that was for the public in Roseville. And among the many comments, one is that hydroelectric does not count as energy efficient power. The city of Roseville is going to be billed by the state of California due to AB 32 $1.5 million. Now, if the city, say Loomis, is going to save money on electricity, on their power, but they're going to have to pay the state whatever you're going to have to pay them, that doesn't make much sense. I would also like to recommend everybody read Behind the Green Mask UN Agenda 21. This was written by a lady who went through this in the city of Santa Rosa. Excellent book, quick read, but it tells you exactly what is happening. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Deborah Jackson and I live in Rockland. The UN Agenda 21 was passed in 1992, so ICLEI's had 20 years head start to implement the policies of Agenda 21. We have to fight this thing or get ready to live in high-rise, smart cities with mass transit as our only means of transportation. Two of the goals of Agenda 21 are to dramatically reduce U.S. energy use and to move Americans off of rural lands and pack them into high-density housing. You can kiss your rural lifestyle goodbye and your small, family-run rural farm. That is why EPA used the excuse of Delta smelt to cut off the water supplies to farmers in the San Joaquin Valley, and look at the impact that has had. ICLEI will pursue any course of action to recapture open land and put it permanently off limits to human use from ranches to farmland. These are going to be no-go zones for humans, and this is radical environmentalism. The only possible way to win this is if enough people are educated about the lie of global warming. So, once smart growth and sustainability are entrenched in our local plans, it will be the only legal way to develop our cities. Agenda 21's real purpose is to remove rural land from service and move people over time into dense, transit-based cities. Colfax rejected all Agenda 21 plans, and I urge you to do so also.
Can I begin? Good evening. My name is Rayanne Val, and I reside at 9701 Vermont Circle in Loomis. I'm also Vice President of Citizen Action Group ROAR. Stands for Reclaiming Our American Rights. Alleged man-made global warming is not settled science. I'm really concerned with this presentation for many reasons. For one, it's based upon the premise that global warming is real, settled science, and therefore we must act urgently to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It is not settled. In fact, 31,000 United States scientists have signed a petition rejecting global warming, stating, there is no convincing scientific evidence that human release of carbon dioxide, methane, or other greenhouse gases is causing or will cause in the foreseeable future catastrophic heating of the Earth's atmosphere and disruption of the Earth's climate. Moreover, they said, there is substantial scientific evidence that increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide produce many beneficial effects upon the natural plant and animal environments of the Earth. Another very concerning issue is that the presenter, Sierra Business Council, has partnered with ICLEI. They may have changed their name to Local Governments for Sustainability, but ICLEI is anything but local. This is an organization to implement Agenda 21 sustainable development locally around the world, bringing the international into our towns and cities. It is a United Nations sponsored group which designs and writes policy on land use, energy goals, measurement, and water usage. It's designed to influence and change local governmental policies related to all aspects of human life and pressure our government for more regulations. We don't need any more regulations. Businesses in California are already drowning in a sea of regulations, and many have already jumped ship. In the summary of the report, ICLEI makes its recommendations. Thanks to Debbie, we all know what travel demand management means. It's pretty scary. Thank you. I have a couple of things to give you guys to share amongst yourselves. It's a packet on understanding sustainable development. And my Citizen Action Group is willing to do a free presentation for the City Council. Here's a letter of recommendation from the City of Colfax. Thank you.
Eric Gull, People's Republic of Los Angeles, and once the earthquake hits, I'll be a citizen of Russia. The bottom line is...
If I could just get your name and address.
Eric, E-R-I-C-G-O-L-U-B.
Okay. And address.
Sure, 10535 Wilshire Boulevard, apartment 714, LA, California, 90024. Bottom line is that, if we allow environmental zealots to control everything, there will be no stopping it. Theoretically, there's nothing stopping them from saying that we should recycle toilet paper. That may sound disgusting, but there's nothing banning it. Secondly, they don't even specify natural versus artificial sustainability. Artificial sustainability is how we get things such as Viagra, and most housewives admit that some things should never ever be sustainable for longer periods of time. The problem is when you get more trees and more ecology and development, you also get more hippies, hipsters, bicyclists, which leads to more people wearing spandex who should not be wearing them. Trees are also the only source of baseball bats, and without baseball bats, we would not be able to take out baby seals. Another problem is that with a war on terror, we go after the terrorists, yet when trees fall on people and kill them, such as had in the recent storms, we don't blame the trees. The only way the town will be safe is if we decide, are we with the trees or are we with the people? And if we want to remove all emissions and make this a much safer town, simply ban all teenage boys because they watch dirty movies and then mothers have to do extra loads of laundry because they can't control their emissions. Lastly, I think we should take all heat lamps and rename them Sandra Calvert lamps because you are absolutely stunning. The bottom line is that this is a disaster. I don't want to take my orders from the Pelosa Raptor or Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who, like Sergeant Schultz, knows absolutely nothing. So that is all I have to say. Thank you very, very much. And again, please do not pass this initiative because it is absolutely destructive. If you want to save on energy, just reduce city council meetings by half. Thank you so much.
Refrain from cheering. Everybody needs to give their opinion, and those that may have an opposing opinion need to come and feel comfortable in doing so. So please allow the same that has been afforded to you. Okay.
Is that it?
Is there anybody else that would like to come to the podium for public comment? Great. Seeing none, I will close.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to compliment the group for one of
They
the...
must have rehearsed it.
That was a really well-presented, well-coordinated presentation. I enjoyed it. The closer was absolutely fantastic. And so I would break from protocol and give you guys.
One quick question.
No, we can't, sir, I'm sorry. So anyway, that we will receive and file and move on to item number 12. And that is the results of the town walk and talk. Hopefully they're just as interested in